Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
We are audiostack.ai.
Combining AI writing, the best synthetic voices,
with production and delivery.
Be it ads, podcasts, or VOs for video.
Just like this ad.
How would you utilize AI audio? For free.
Go to audiostack.ai/contest.
Give us just a few details.
And you could replace this spot and be heard by millions.
See webpage for T's and C's. audiostack.ai/contest.
Yesterday, in a Delaware courtroom, a jury was handed Hunter Biden's fate. The president's son has been on trial for a week, accused of purchasing a gun while addicted to drugs back in 2018. The problem is that when Hunter filled out ATF paperwork to get the gun, he got asked if he was a user of narcotics or controlled substances. And he checked the no box. How likely do you think it is that Hunter Biden will be found guilty?
I think it's quite likely he'll be found guilty.
Politico's Ankush Khardori went to Wilmington last week to watch this case begin to play out. It stuck with him, not in a good way.
Literally the first exhibit that they introduced in the case was his book, and then they proceeded to play 70 minutes of clips from the audiobook, which was Hunter Biden himself reading about his kind of years of addiction and relapse over this very long period.
I'm also an alcoholic and a drug addict. I've bought crack cocaine on the streets of Washington, D.C., and cooked up my own inside a hotel bungalow in Los Angeles. I had no plan beyond the moment-to-moment demands of the crack pipe.
It was very awkward. I mean, I have to say, like, just sitting there, you're listening to someone describe really kind of the lowest moments of their life in kind of very raw and evocative terms. So like on a personal level, a psychological level, I found that to be, a little difficult.
I dove into the kind of next-level binging few addicts see coming. By now, I possessed a new superpower, the ability to find crack in any town at any time, no matter how unfamiliar the terrain.
But then as a prosecutorial matter, honestly, I found it quite distasteful. And a little unseemly, and I just would never have done that.
Why?
Because there's no point. I mean, this is this person and their family's lowest points in their lives. He poses no apparent danger to the community. He doesn't need to be disabled necessarily from buying another gun. It doesn't seem like he has any interest in owning another gun. It's not going to deter him or anyone else from engaging in the conduct here, which is using drugs unlawfully or being a drug addict and then purchasing a gun, because tens of millions of people do it anyway and are currently doing it. It's like, so it was hard for me to see like kind of the point of this prosecution, to be honest, literally the point of it as a prosecutorial matter.
On the one hand, Ankush says, this Hunter Biden case is open and shut, simple as can be.
But this is not a charge. Like, I've never seen a comparable case. Never seen a standalone case charging someone with lying on a form about drug use, and that's the only charge. Never. And I've seen no one even identify a comparable case. These prosecutors are basically just like airing out the Biden family's dirty laundry and humiliating the president's son. That's basically what I think has happened.
Today on the show, Hunter Biden's trial may seem like it has a predictable ending, but it also has a cost. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around.
It's hard to imagine a world where we leave future generations with fewer rights and freedoms. The Supreme Court has stolen the constitutional right to control our bodies. Now politicians in nearly every state have introduced bills that would block people from getting the essential sexual and reproductive care they need, including abortion. Planned Parenthood believes everyone deserves access to care. It's a human right. We won't give up, and we won't back down. Help ensure the next generation can decide their own futures. Donate to Planned Parenthood. Visit plannedparenthood.org/future.
This episode is brought to you by Discover. When it comes to your finances, Discover wants you to know they are the credit card that is always there for you. With 24/7 U.S.-based live customer service, everyone has the option to talk to a real person anytime, day or night. Yep, that means no more waiting for, quote, normal business hours just to get a hold of someone. We are talking real service from real people whenever you need it. Get the customer service you deserve with Discover. Limitations apply. See terms at discover.com/creditcard. Let's remind people how Hunter Biden ended up in a Delaware courtroom facing gun charges in the first place. Because until like a year ago, there was a pretty real chance that this prosecution simply was not going to happen, right? What changed?
Yeah, so about a year ago, there was sort of a global plea agreement in place.
You say global because it involves like multiple charges, like the gun charge we're talking about here, tax charges, all sorts of things.
Exactly. So the deal that Hunter Biden's lawyers had worked out with the government would have required him to plead guilty to misdemeanor tax fraud counts and then to agree to enter a pretrial diversion program to resolve the potential gun charges without having to take a guilty plea on those charges. So he would plead out to misdemeanor tax charges, no conviction on the gun side, but agreement to go to a pretrial diversion program in lieu of any charge. And if by happenstance he failed for some reason to see that pretrial diversion program through its completion, the government could then rebring those charges because he would have breached the agreement. That was the proposal.
So how'd it fall apart?
They presented to the Judge Noriega, who is a Trump appointee in the District of Delaware.
The same person who's overseeing this trial now.
Correct. And she bristles at this agreement. She has a question, which I think was a legitimate question about the structure of the agreement. It was a little unusual the way that they papered it. Not anything that needed to preclude this deal from going through, but just something that a conscientious judge would work through with the parties, which happens from time to time. They work through plea agreements and say, well, maybe we need to change this, that, or the other. Anyway, she raised a question about the immunity provision.
Well, because Hunter would have been immune from future prosecution with this deal, right?
Well, not necessarily. That was the point of disagreement eventually that emerged, that is what Hunter Biden's lawyers thought, which is absolutely what I would have expected if under Hunter Biden's lawyers, that's how these things work. And then the government said, well, no, we're not necessarily, we are going to maintain our ability to bring some charges potentially at a later date. Our investigation is ongoing. Honestly, it sounded like BS, to be honest, because I don't see why they would have even entered into this agreement and tried to get it approved if they really had other streams of investigative work going. And the judge in particular, and this is where I think she really crossed the line, was like, well, what about potential charges under the Foreign Agent Registration Act, FARA, which is this law that in the post-Trump years has emerged in sort of significance in this sort of area where people are kind of taking money from foreign interests and this, that, or the other to potentially influence American politics.
And this is a whole other issue. This gets into Hunter Biden working in Ukraine, right? Like years and years ago.
Well, correct. And also it's very telling that she was attuned to it because what was happening at the time was Republicans in Congress were all over these facts as a potential way to impeach Joe Biden. So that was what it was in the news. And it was, I thought, quite telling that she latched onto it and decided that she was going to ask the guy. I've just not seen that happen before. And it seemed apparent to me, particularly in hindsight, I think she was not keen to see that deal go through. And so it fell apart as a result. The judge said, why don't you guys see if you can figure out why you're not on the same page with the scope of immunity, and maybe you can work something out. But the reality is she exposed or created potentially an unbridgeable divide because of the point at which the parties are explicitly disagreeing about whether the immunity provision does X or Y. I mean, then the deal's done.
So let's talk about what's gone down in the courtroom over the last week or so. This case, as we said, it's about a gun Hunter Biden possessed for like a couple weeks, not even. What does the prosecution argue here?
Yeah, he had it for 11 days. But, the charges are, two of them stem from his alleged misrepresentation on a form that he had to fill out to get the gun, in which he was asked whether or not he was an unlawful user of or addicted to drugs or controlled substances. He allegedly checked no, and that forms the basis for 2 of the charges just off the back of the form. And then a third charge is just for unlawfully possessing the gun as an unlawful user of or an addict to a controlled substance.
So what's Hunter Biden's defense attorney's approach been here? Because they're dealing with a load of evidence, and you say in some ways it's like an open and shut case. So how do you even fight that?
So I think they have 2 principal strategies. One is at the trial level itself, is to argue that Hunter Biden is not guilty of the offenses charged because he did not knowingly make the misrepresentation on that form, because he may have thought honestly that he was not actually addicted to drugs at the time, because I think that he had just finished a stint in rehab not too much prior. So that's one argument. I don't think that's a particularly compelling argument, because if it were, then any charge like this could be successfully defended by just having the defendant take the stand and say, I really thought I was clean, even though I might not have been. So that kind of can't be a viable defense, but we'll see. Ultimately, it'll be up to the jury. And then the second is a bit of a longer play, which is this argument that Hunter Biden should be protected under the Second Amendment, that the charges are invalid under the Second Amendment, and particularly the Supreme Court's recent, very pro-gun jurisprudence in this area.
Basically, the founding fathers didn't have to fill out a form like this, so Hunter Biden, so this doesn't count.
It's like something to that effect, but basically, if we adopt the Supreme Court's originalist Second Amendment jurisprudence, then this prosecution, these laws that prohibit drug users from obtaining firearms may in fact be unconstitutional. That's a real viable argument, colorable argument at this point. I don't know if it would carry the day, but given what the Supreme Court has done, Hunter Biden's lawyers are absolutely correct to be maintaining and preserving this argument.
But Ankush says it's looking like an uphill battle for Hunter's defense team. In addition to those audiobook excerpts, the prosecution called a couple of Hunter's past romantic partners, asking them to testify to the depths of his addiction over years and years.
They've basically been filling in different points of time, right, when they were, married to him in one case or otherwise had romantic relationships with him, where the government has basically called them one after one to basically say, was he on drugs at this period of time? What was he like? And they're all basically saying at these various points of time that he always essentially had a very serious drug problem.
Yeah, to me, it's just what they've been saying totally underlines the heartbreak of dealing with addiction in your family. Like at some point, they entered into the record text messages from Hunter Biden's daughter, and she was basically like, please come visit me at school. It's just like very sad stuff.
It is very sad stuff. And in that instance, it was Hunter Biden's lawyers who called his daughter, so you can kind of put that on them. But yeah, I think a lot of people can see elements of their own experience or friends or family's experience in this story. And I want to be clear, even though I am quite critical of the case at this point, it's not like this is the world's greatest injustice in the criminal justice system that, people need to be all up in arms about. It's an episode that I think is unfortunate.
You mean the bringing of this case is being unfortunate?
Yeah. But I don't want to oversell it. I mean, this is a man who is, he's an adult. And at some points along the way in the course of his life, he made some bad choices. And then, of course, became addicted, at which point things get much more difficult and aren't entirely necessarily your choices.
We'll be right back.
We are audiostack.ai.
Combining AI writing, the best synthetic voices,
with production and delivery.
Be it ads, podcasts, or VOs for video.
Just like this ad.
How would you utilize AI audio? For free.
Go to audiostack.ai/contest.
Give us just a few details.
And you could replace this spot and be heard by millions.
See webpage for T's and C's. audiostack.ai/contest.
Hey everybody, Jon Stewart here. I am here to tell you about my new podcast, The Weekly Show, coming out every Thursday. We're going to be talking about the election, earnings calls, What are they talking about on these earnings calls? We're going to be talking about ingredient to bread ratio on sandwiches. I know you have a lot of options as far as podcasts go, but how many of them come out on Thursday? Listen to The Weekly Show with Jon Stewart wherever you get your podcasts.
I have to have a moment of honesty with you, Ankush, which is I can see why a casual Trump supporter would look at what's happening with Hunter Biden and think of it as analogous to what took place in New York City with Donald Trump, the so-called hush money trial, where Trump was just found guilty. Both cases are about paperwork that went sideways. Both seem like a stretch to prosecute. But to you, as a former prosecutor, is there a difference?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's some elements that are similar, and that reaction is, I think, a very common one among people. The way I would describe it, I guess, is in each case we're seeing prosecutors construct and present theories that seem bespoke. Let's put it that way, right? I don't like using lawfare or like witch hunt or whatever, but they seem to be theories for these particular cases. Now, as a general matter, I have brought theories for particular cases, or like tried to develop novel arguments that I thought would get a prosecution over the finish line and did in fact work. The question is always really, when you sort of peek under the hood, is did these facts merit that level of attention and investment, and is there a serious public purpose being served by the prosecution, or a serious, very specific purpose being served, meaning I have to deter this specific person from doing this particular thing again. So some obvious distinctions arise. First, Trump was the president, Hunter Biden, not so much.
You mean he's just more powerful, so doing something wrong is worse?
Yeah, and for prosecutors, one thing that they want to do is they want to deter similar misconduct in the future. And I do think there is an argument, a much stronger argument for deterrence in the Trump prosecution case than in the Hunter Biden case, because, and also in the Trump prosecution case, again, however heavily you weight it, they did have an argument that that case was really about election interference, or at least had electoral implications that made it more relevant to the public at large, right? The notion that this involves more serious stakes than just Trump having this affair and then paying someone off.
You know, former President Trump has said publicly that he plans to prosecute his political enemies if he gets elected this fall. And Trump made a point of going after Hunter for years. I think it's fair to say that without Trump's longstanding grievance here, this case might not have moved forward at all. Do you think that's fair?
I agree. I don't think the case would have been, the investigation would have gone on in this fashion, this aggressively, this long, resolved in this way, had it not been for Donald Trump's very aggressive interest in the subject matter. And then even during the plea deal, around when that was happening, it wasn't even just Trump, it was Republicans in Congress who were basically lobbying for more punishment of Hunter Biden. I mean, it was quite a remarkable thing.
It's actually kind of stunning to me that this case moved forward, even though Donald Trump isn't in office. It shows the power he wields as a political figure and the power of his judicial appointees.
Yeah, it is quite disturbing, I have to say. I mean, because again, like we talked about, there's this resolution on the table, it made sense, and then all of a sudden he doesn't like it. So then you have all these Republicans in Congress complaining about it in ways that I thought were inaccurate. Then you have the judge, his appointee, echoing those concerns. Then you have the prosecutors who then become unwitting or witting, I don't know, instruments of these political actors. It's a very unfortunate series of events.
If he's found guilty, how much prison time is Hunter Biden potentially looking at here?
My colleague, Betsy Woodruff Swan over at Politico, I think she consulted some folks and indicated that his guideline sentence, meaning the recommended sentence, would be over a year. But in practice, in a situation like this, a first-time offender, he hasn't been convicted before. Again, he's got a pretty, to my mind, a good story to tell about his life and the changes he's made since the offense conduct. I think he would have a very compelling case for probation.
President Biden could potentially pardon his son, right?
He could. He said recently that he will not, but he could.
A verdict will likely come quickly in this case. Reports were that the president was in Delaware yesterday, presumably to see his son. But Ankush says, as hard as this trial has been on the president, there's a potential opportunity here, too.
I think it's something as simple as a speech on the rule of law. Whether it's at a commencement address, whether it's in the White House, something that elevates this subject matter to the place it deserves. Now, again, I'm moving beyond just the Hunter Biden case, but all of this, because the Biden administration has been very hands-off about kind of the federal criminal cases against Trump, what they mean, whether and to what extent the public should care about them. A lot of that has been explicitly in the reporting, some concern that he doesn't want to politicize the prosecutions against Trump by the Justice Department. But one thing that Biden literally himself can do is tell this story about this country and what the rule of law ought to mean in this country, meaning not just that it ought to apply to our former presidents, including Donald Trump, and Biden cannot and should not weigh in on Trump's guilt, but also we have a set of processes that Biden has decided to follow and his attorney general has decided to follow that has produced a result that is personally very painful to him. It must be. It is, according to the reporting, right? Very painful, not just to Hunter Biden, but to his father. And I think there's kind of something admirable about that, about a president, believing in something so strongly that he would actually be willing to, I don't want to say sacrifice, but like expose his son and his family to serious potential long-term reputational harm, embarrassment, pain, in order to pursue that broader objective of kind of reinstating a sense that the law applies to everyone, good, bad, powerful, not powerful, Democrat, Republican, this, that, or the other. And you just kind of have to deal with it. It's the kind of the cost of living in this country if we want to have a country with a real, mature, workable legal system.
Ankush, thanks for coming on the show and explaining everything. I'm grateful for you.
Thanks for having me.
Ankush Khardori is an attorney and a former federal prosecutor in the U.S. Justice Department. He's also a contributor to Politico. And that is our show. If you're a fan of What Next, the best way to support our work is to join Slate Plus. Going over to slate.com/whatnextplus to sign up. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, and Madeline Ducharme. We are led by Alicia Montgomery with a little boost from Susan Matthews. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you back here next time.
We are audiostack.ai.
Combining AI writing, the best synthetic voices,
with production and delivery.
Be it ads, podcasts, or VOs for video.
Just like this ad.
How would you utilize AI audio? For free.
Go to audiostack.ai/contest.
Give us just a few details.
And you could replace this spot and be heard by millions.
See webpage for T's and C's. audiostack.ai/contest.